Yeah, well, I wanted to ask. So. Once again, can all of you please take your seats so we can get started? Okay, why don't we get started? I hope all of you had fruitful conversations. How did it go? Thumbs up? Yeah, great. So next we have a panel, and it is putting to practice the city ways. And so we have our moderator, English professor Jesus Limon, that is going to lead us through the panel process. So, Jesus?
Hello, everybody. So my name is Jesus Limon. I'm an English faculty member here and an equity coordinator. I am also an alumni of Sacramento City College. I'm incredibly proud of that. Thank you. And though I am an alumni, I also want to acknowledge that I am a guest to the land. My dad is from Manalisco, Jalisco. My mother is from San Pedro, Nayarit. And I want to, in honoring them and where they come from, and honoring the land, I wanted to also acknowledge the land and acknowledge that the history of Sacramento area and the people is rich in heritage, culture, and tradition. This area was and is still the tribal land of the Nisenan people who were located throughout the Central Valley, the foothills, home to the southern Maidu people, the Valley Miwok, and Miwok people were located on the east side of American River, known to the tribal people as the Mokelumne or the Condor River. To the west of the American River and the south of Sacramento River are the Patwin people, the Wintun people, and the Wintu people. SCC honors the people of this land. All right, that was the most nerve-wracking part of it all. I did not want to mess up because I really do want to honor the land that we stand on and pay respect and to the traditions of honoring and acknowledging tribal lands. So hopefully today we've heard about 4 ways. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to engage in conversation about how we can implement these 4 ways in our classroom, in the hallways, as part of the culture of Sacramento City College. These 4 ways are not the flavor of the month, right? These 4 ways are actually part of an ongoing conversation and tradition that we've been engaged with, right? These 4 ways stem from a lot of the equity work that's been happening on this campus, right? They do not come from outside research. They come from internal reflection and internal investigation about what is it that works on our campus, right? Recognizing the people that are engaging with successful practices and identifying why those folks are successful, right? So to ensure that those 4 ways are not recognized as something that's brand new and that they'll be gone in another semester, right? I think it's important to highlight practices already existing on this campus that operate in those 4 ways, right? So that we can see the experts on our campus that already engage with those 4 ways and what kind of result that work produces, right? So to that end, we have the panel that you're about to experience today. We have folks from the Writing Center. We have folks from the Chemistry Department. We have folks from RISE. And we have folks that have been working on professional learning communities on campus. So those will be the 4 topics, the 4 areas that we'll cover today. We'll begin with the Writing Center. And so I'd like to introduce Susan Griffin, the coordinator of the Writing Center, Megan Fasciuto, and Katie Pinkston, who are instructional assistants within the Writing Center.
Thank you. So the Writing Center is a free, open resource available to all students at Sac City to bring in any writing from any course across the disciplines, to have one-on-one conversations in person or online at any stage of their writing process. The Writing Center has a handful of classified and faculty tutors, but most of our overall staff is made up of students, student peer tutors. So over the past few years, the Writing Center's made some gradual informed changes as a result of some purposeful research and collaboration to better serve the students coming in, but in particular students of color. Some of the shifts that we've made that have had the most impact include changes to our hiring process, to our tutor education course, which Susan teaches for all students who are starting out as new tutors in the Writing Center, and to our overall environment within the library. So for our hiring, for a long time we wanted to hire more students of color as writing tutors in order to have a staff that truly reflected the demographics of the overall student population at Sac City. But sometimes we're frustrated because we weren't getting many applications from students of color. So we started having some conversations with writing instructors from cohorts like Emoja, Puente, and later SCC and Sage, specifically about how our center might better identify potential students from these programs who might work well tutoring their peers. We also started doing more intentional visits to specific classes and student clubs with the main purpose of talking with students about why we want to hire more tutors of color. And during these years, we also started thinking about the potentially confusing parts of our hiring process for prospective writing tutors on campus. So we started hosting some workshops to explain, mostly led by student tutors, what kinds of roles tutors play for their peers, so that students felt more comfortable applying and more aware about the work that writing centers actually do.
As Megan mentioned, new tutors at the Writing Center take a one-unit tutor training class, and we also have ongoing meetings for new and returning tutors, and we implemented changes to both of these. We added discussions of equity goals and specific projects in tutor meetings and asked for tutors' feedback and advice about the projects that we were working on. In both tutor meetings and the writing tutoring class, we've also emphasized the importance of building relationships with students by tutoring in ways that show students that they're valued and cared about. In the writing tutoring class, I also added readings about and discussion of African American English and as a separate dialect or language, and we also discussed the strong bias against African American English in academic settings and the need to be aware of and to resist that bias.
So the next significant set of changes that Megan mentioned were designed to help the Writing Center become a more welcoming environment for students. After a few years of student survey feedback that showed a desire for food during tutoring sessions, the Writing Center partnered with RISE, enabling us to pick up food every week to provide completely free, no strings attached snacks for students who are visiting us. Through attendance at equity workshops, we decided to start including student tutor and staff profiles on our website and out on the tutoring tables in the center to help build trust between tutors and students. We also began cultivating a social media presence on Instagram where we feature these profiles as well as the successes of students who visit us. Thanks to these same equity workshops, we created a reading area with a small library of contemporary works by African American and Latinx authors available for students to check out. The area includes an author spotlight every month so that students see a writer of color celebrated in an area where they are working on their own writing. We also made changes to the student sign-up process, making it more conversational and friendly, and shortening the registration form by eliminating unnecessary questions and shortening our list of policies on the back of the form.
That brings us to the results that we've seen for these changes. We've measured progress in a variety of ways, but here I'm going to focus on improvements in class success rates. This graph that you have in front of you shows the course success for the 4 major demographic groups that visit the Writing Center. The middle column there shows the course success for the 5 semesters since we've been doing these changes. The column before that, the first column, shows the student success rates before we started implementing the equity changes, and the final column, the one on the far end, shows the differences between the two. So you can see that for all 4 of the demographic groups, there have been increases in success rates since we've been doing these changes, and that difference is greatest for African American students, which is the group that we were most wanting to target because that's where the biggest gap was before this. This next slide shows semester by semester success rates. The one in gold is overall success of students who come to the Writing Center. So across all the demographic groups. The bottom one, the one in burgundy, is for African American students. And you can see in this also, we started the changes in spring 2017. So for most of the semesters since then, those 2 lines are closer together than they were prior to that, except for that one semester that's an outlier there. We feel like we've made some progress with the changes that we've made, but this is an ongoing effort, and we're continuing to think about what we can do to improve what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, the staff from the Writing Center. We're going to have a further conversation with them once everybody does an introduction, a similar introduction about the program, and they share out the data, and we'll have an opportunity to engage more with how it is that they went about implementing these changes. But it is important to highlight, as Susan did so far, that most of the changes that were implemented, again, were as a result of a lot of the equity conversations that happened previously, right? So that these weren't sort of randomized results, right? That they stem from a lot of the professional development, a lot of the conversations that were had in previous conversations, and those were practices that were put into place after lots of conversation, right? So I think oftentimes we think, we leave a place like this and we think, oh, that was awesome, but how's that going to turn into practice? It's worth highlighting the people and the programs that are putting ideas and values to practice, the Writing Center being one of them. So thank you for that. Next, we're going to have Carla Lopez Chaveste. That's a new last name, Carla. I didn't know you had that. Okay. So Carla's going to talk about RISE, and particularly the implementation of Junior RISE at Hiram Johnson.
Hello, good morning. So Junior RISE is the extension of the RISE program at our feeder high school, Hiram Johnson. The program started as a support for high school seniors that were credit deficient and weren't looking to graduate high school, to help them gain credits that they needed in order to graduate. So by offering this to the high school students, we gave them the opportunity to graduate high school and look at higher education as a possibility and as something that they could reach. Because many students sometimes think that they're not college material, and our goal of offering Junior RISE at the high schools was to alleviate that and to help them throughout the whole process for when they get here. So the program actually has evolved from just focusing on credit deficient students to now we actually created a summer bridge program. So the main 3 habits or tools that we found were needed throughout this were collaborating with faculty. So it was really important for us to collaborate with the faculty at the high school, because they have experience with their students. They have known their students for 3 years. They know the best practices of how to reach out those students. And they have identified which students would benefit more from the program. So at the high school level, it was really important to make those connections on campus. At the college level, talking to colleagues here, we came to the conclusion that offering a summer program, which is what we started 2 years ago, we created a summer bridge program with our EOPS program and our English department. So we offer English 300 over the summer for students to get that jump start and to already, when they come on their first semester after graduating as high school students, they have already fulfilled that 300 English writing requirement. And then one of the other topics was building meaningful connections. So in my field of work, it is very important to connect with students. So that follow up, students don't know how to ask for questions or don't know how to go out there and reach out to what they need. So it was really important for me to have that one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, emailing them, and then in our new technology role, text. Text is the biggest thing. So we had to be open with texting. So all the time texting our students, being available for them when they had questions, even if it was just randomly throughout the day, just knowing that they had somebody that they could ask and not be afraid was something that I see makes a big difference on how that student performs in school. And then also our tailored student placement. So as a proud product of the Los Rios Community College, Sac City in specific, EOPS, Puente, I am familiar with the different programs and student support programs that we offer on campus. And basically, sorry. So connecting those students and offering and explaining to them the different programs that the school offers in order for them to be successful, I think it's a very important, and it's what helps them keep them connected and here to the campus. Because I know as a college student, I suffered with that ghost syndrome where I would just come to class and then leave my first semester. But it wasn't until I started connecting with different programs on campus, RISE, EOPS, Puente, that I found my learning community, that I found my community, that I became successful, that I made connections with my professors, and my professors that encouraged me to basically complete my education at Sac City and transfer over to Sac State. So I am real. I feel like because of as a first generation student, I dealt with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of like fear of coming into college and just not knowing who to ask questions from. So in my position, I've made it a goal to alleviate those for the future students that are coming here. And then, so some data that we have for in 2018, we had a 90% success rate of the students that took the college class at their high school campus. So we offer a professor from Sac City comes over to the high school after school as a 7 period, and the students take a class with the HCD class. So they'll learn the different foundations of the tools given that we have here at school. In 2019, we had a 86 success rate. And then from there, we stemmed to our summer bridge program. So in 2018, we had a 90 success rate. And then in 2019, we had a 90 success rate, sorry.
Thank you, Carla. It is incredibly difficult to stand here and articulate all the hard work that has been going into a program like Junior Rise. But I think it is important to also to make the distinction that regardless of the presentation, acknowledge that the numbers don't lie, right? And that even though you have previous alumni that are standing in front of you, making a significant effort to share out how they've achieved numbers that peer-reviewed journals wish they had. We get there by doing exactly what college has modeled for us, which is be incredibly uncomfortable and engage with practices that we would rather have somebody else do. Right? So thank you, Carla, for modeling that behavior. With that, I'd like to also invite Dr. Devon Stewart to come up and talk about the changes that he's implemented within the classroom and how he's implemented contract grading in chemistry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm hoping that I don't lose my voice today. I'm Dr. Devon Stewart, and I remember my first day in a chemistry class, how nervous I was. And I like to tell my students that I didn't start off doing spectacularly well in chemistry. I got an F on my first exam. And I'm so happy that the professors that I had at the time cared enough to develop relationships with me, which is why I'm standing here today. So I recognized pretty early that the relationships that we develop with our students is really important for their success. And with that in mind, when my students see me coming in front of the classroom, they do not know my story, they do not know the journey. And so my ultimate goal was to create a system in my classroom that would provide an incentive for students to want to develop a relationship with me as their professor. So when I first heard about contract grading, I wasn't too impressed by it, but it took me to do some self-reflection to get to this point. So what I developed was a contract in my class that provided an incentive for students to develop community and collaboration amongst themselves, an incentive for them to want to be curious about chemistry and the content, and definitely an incentive for them to build relationship with me and want to continue working on complicated material. So the first element of the contract is an incentive for community building. We all know that it's our community that we can depend on that gets us through the hardest time. So I want the students to form a community within the classroom so they can see the classroom as a safe space. They can see me as a safe space. Definitely an incentive for content engagement. It's chemistry. We need to be curious about the content and constantly engaging with the content. So there was an additional incentive in the contract for that. An incentive to get to know me, to get to see the human side behind me, to get to know my story, my journey, and to see office hours as a safe haven. You know, office hours where they can just come and chill and chat. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, I have a problem, that's when I need to utilize office hours, which is what I realize a lot of the students in my class. Office hours is just when we have problems. But no, sometimes you can just come in, say hello, we can talk, and build a relationship. So there's an incentive for that. And I'm a data guy. I love data. So what you're seeing in the yellow is my success rate before the contract. My first semester, I had around a 72% success rate. The semester following that, it dropped to a 63% success rate in chemistry. The class that I teach is a gatekeeper course. And actually, this course was published in an ACS journal a couple of years ago. That is the course that causes students to change their major from STEM. So you can, I thought for sure it was math, right? I wouldn't believe that it was chemistry. No offense to the math folks, right? Right? And after the contract, what you're seeing in red is my course success rate. So my course success rate actually jumped between 10 to 15%, just putting an incentive to build community within the classroom and building a relationship with your professor. So we do this standardized exam, and what you're seeing in the lower table there, so prior to the contract, the class normally scored around 10 to 15% above the national average. Prior to the implementation of the contract, my class has been scoring 20 to 27% above the national average on that exam. That's a 10 to 15% change just by encouraging students to tap into the community and building community within the classroom and making them feel safe within the classroom. So I'm going to have more time to talk more about this, but thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Devon, for sharing that. Again, impressive data, right? And again, modeling how one practice, particularly a practice that, as he'll share about later, a practice that was not necessarily innately inspiring, right? Being uncomfortable with rolling something out new that did not feel like would be a natural fit. How practicing something that's not a natural fit can create these sort of statistical changes in our success. And last, to finish up our panel, we have Donna DiMartini, who is going to talk about her experience in participating in and leading professional learning communities.
So I was someone who invited Dr. Asau anyway here a few years ago, and he did a workshop on contract grading, and I remember Devon's face when he was talking about it. Devon was like, yeah, he was not buying it at all. Anyway, my name is Donna DiMartini, and I've taught here in English writing, or I've taught English writing here since 2006, and I'm also currently serving as one of the faculty equity coordinators along with Jesus Limon and Adam Fries. Really, my role on this panel is to highlight some of the ways that the professional learning communities some of the professional learning communities that already exist on this campus have already been invested in doing this work of the city ways. We haven't had them necessarily articulated to us like they were delineated today, but it's really been the founding sort of kind of the foundational concepts of the professional learning communities that are available for faculty on the campus. So some of those that I've been involved in are, department specific. So for example, we have a professional learning community in the English department for faculty who teach in our English Writing 108 class, which is the co-requisite support class for our transfer level composition course. And in a way, that learning community kind of evolved out of a professional learning community that already existed for faculty teaching in the English and ESL departments in our mentoring program. But I've also been a member of campus-wide PLCs, professional learning communities. So for example, Teachers for Equity, or T4E, which is a 2-semester-long cohort-style learning community. I was a participant in the first cohort, and now I'm able to participate by way of co-facilitating as my role, in my role as equity coordinator. And that's, of course, open to folks from every discipline. And I'm also a current member of the SCC PLC, so SCC, the STEM Equity and Success Initiative, and that's also open. It's welcome to multidisciplinary members, and it's not exclusive to folks who work or teach in the STEM courses. So my role on the panel is really to kind of highlight and hopefully kind of pinpoint some of the ways that the work has already been happening in at least faculty spaces on the campus, and hopefully inspire those of you who aren't already involved to join a professional learning community, or maybe even create one in your own department. So.
Thank you, Donna. And so now I'd like to invite the panelists to join me to join the panel so that we can have a further conversation about some of these practices. So regret doing this. I would have been so much happier just sitting in the audience texting, having a wonderful group chat with all of my colleagues.
I'll text you right now, Jesus, if you want.
We still have a group chat. Yeah. And critique our own presentation.
Yeah. Very meta.
Well, hoping that this is an opportunity to again sort of like jump into some further conversation about the practices that were discussed today, but more so than just the intro is a very we get together, and I share this in the conversation that I heard that I led earlier. We get together in space like this, and they just become ultra celebratory, right? It's just like, oh, this is how great I'm doing, this is how great we're doing, and it just becomes a super celebration that ignores the reality of the data that we face every day, right? So rather than, we wanted the intro to be obviously to celebrate and highlight some great work, but now let's get more into like the nitty gritty. What did it get? What were the process? What were the steps that we took to get to these sort of outcomes, right? Because we don't want to romanticize those outcomes or the process, right? And I like to start with Devon, only because I was present when you were actually introduced to contract grading and experienced your utter rage and your desire to turn over tables when people implied that there may be racism in chemistry.
Yes. I remember. I hope I don't have a bad reputation on campus, flipping tables but I wasn't happy with contract grading the first time I heard it. I'm like, this could never apply to science, this could never apply to a chemistry class, and I went on and on and on. But I think the key for me was it required, I obviously is working in other disciplines. The data shows, right? We can't question the data. So it required me to do some self-reflection. Like, what can I do with contract grading, or how can I change contract grading to suit a science class? And so my entire course is not contract graded because we have to, knowledge, you have to get something right or wrong, right? The last thing you want is your surgeon saying, you know what, I tried my best. That wouldn't, you need them to get it right. So what I did, I implemented like 10% of my course grade goes towards a contract. And essentially, what I like about the current model that I have is that I've implemented some, I would like to say, habits that I want the students to develop to be successful in the course. And so the students are so focused on getting that 10%, and it ended up being a bigger benefit to them because it ended up ultimately helping them to learn the material, keep on being engaged with the material, to ultimately score higher on the ACS exam, which we give, which is a national exam, which we give at the end of the semester. So it kind of serves like twofold. But in the beginning, I did not like it. I thought it was a bad idea. But I think the major thing is sometimes when you're introduced to an idea, you don't necessarily have to like it, but you need to be willing to, reflect on it and critique your own style. Not because I've been teaching chemistry the same way and I think this is how chemistry is supposed to be taught. Then I'm blinded by, new ways or approaches to teaching the material that could ultimately lead to improvement in student success.
And so in your contract, is 10% of the grade, 10% of the student's grade is awarded based on them completing certain requirements, right?
Yes, that's correct. All right. So the students have to attend a certain amount of office hours. They have to form study groups and do online activities together. And at the beginning of the semester, I must say, students come in with a mindset, okay, this is what my chemistry class should look like, because that's what they're accustomed to, right? So the startup to getting the students excited about the contract based on the class can be slow sometimes, but once they get into the rhythm of things, it's just magical. It changes the dynamics of the class. It takes away that competitive edge, right? So if a classmate is failing, it's not, okay, this guy is failing, the A students, I don't care about it anymore, because the contract have it built in there that as an A student, you have the responsibility to contribute to the class community. So there's an incentive for you to ask for help, and there's an incentive for you to give the help. And we have a log sheet that students will fill it out, so everybody benefits from the contract.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's, the thing that I find most valuable about that one is that you found a way to implement what we know are great habits of students, right? We know that successful students engage with these habits, right? And that you made it a part of the syllabus, that you made it a part of the grade, so the students saw as like, okay, if I do those things, I get 10%, but it's not that the students are doing better because of the additional 10%, but it's because the students are committing those habits.
Yes.
Why their test scores or that success rate
Exactly.
is moving, right? It's
Yes.
because they're engaging with the habits, not just because of the 10%. The 10% is just the vehicle.
Yeah.
for that engagement?
They're engaging with the content more, and they're definitely coming to more office hour sessions. You know, they're developing a relationship with me. The classroom now becomes a community. And there is such a beauty when you can turn the classroom into a community where the weaker students know that, listen, I am not going through this by myself, right? My classmates are here to help me, my professors are here to help me. And that's what the contract does, right? Yeah, it holds the whole class, including myself, accountable for the class average and everybody's grade.
Yeah, thank you for that, Devon.
Thank you.
And so Devon highlights the notion that is not, being introduced to these practices is not always ideal, right? Like when we get introduced to these practices, there may be several people in this audience having the same response that Devon had when we introduced the idea of contract grading, right? Dismissive, thinking about like, no, this can never work in the work that I do, right? But that if we engage with enough self-reflection and further engagement with the topic, that we may be able to apply it in a way that makes sense for our classes, right? And so following up with that, I want to sort of piggyback off of that and ask Carla to talk a little bit more about her experience with Junior Rise, because I think, Junior Rise, and I participated in the program, I've led classes in the programs, and when we talk about Junior Rises, there's like very nice experiences, like, oh my God, we go to the high schools, oh, that must mean that the high school students embrace us and welcome us, and they must cherish the fact that we're spending our evenings trying to prepare them for college, right? And I know personally that's not the experience. So I'd like to ask Carla to talk a little bit more about an authentic response to what is that program? How do you get to those numbers? How do you get to build those connections? What is the student's response to you and Junior Rise when you first arrive on campus?
Like you mentioned, they're curious to know why I am there and why I take the time to help them be successful when they come to college. And then one of the things that I've noticed a lot, like to ask, is want to know what my journey was. They always ask me, oh, are you a student at Sac City? I was like, no, I'm not anymore, but I was a student, and this is how I did it. Like, I always share with them how my first semester as a student and not being part of any learning communities, I struggled and I failed all my classes. So I always express to them that it's important for them to be connected and to join different learning communities. And in order to build those relationships, you have to indirectly kind of push them towards what it is like joining a class. So we start by getting to know them, like what is their personal goals, what is that they're planning to do at their high school, their family, are they the oldest, are they the youngest, do they have support at home? So building those connections and getting to know the students, and I've noticed it makes a big difference when you build a connection and you remember something. So the next time you see that student, you're like, oh, hey, I remember we had this conversation. Are you still interested in maybe pursuing history or being a math major? So it makes a difference when you take the time to build those connections, you take the time to get to know them, and also like remember their name and what is that their goal and what they are looking to do. Because as Jesus mentioned, sometimes we go there and a lot of students are like, oh, I don't want to go to college. I'm the oldest, I don't have any support. I want to go out in the work field and start making money. So a lot of students think that it's easier to do that, maybe take a gap year. They're like, oh, I'm going to take some time off, work, and then go to school. So just getting to know them and maybe encourage them to like, no, maybe start going to school, try it out, because if you go to work, it's going to be harder for you to come back after. So just getting to know them and building those relationships indirectly, pushing them to take the classes or to be part of any of the other learning communities. So also connecting them to other programs. And I know a lot of my colleagues are actually at the high school too, so connecting them with them, and that way they have a face-to-face of who they could reach out in those other programs.
That really helps, right? Like making sure that you make that hand-to-hand handoff.
Yes.
But I remember from working with young people, we're working at the high schools, a former supervisor of mine used to tell me, man, don't even listen to what they're saying. Students, young people vote with their feet. So the fact that they show up means that they want to be there. And that made so much sense because, yeah, I would be at the high schools, and I'm sure you experienced this, and all the students come to my class, but then I'm like, all right, let's do some work. And they're like, no, we don't like this, we don't care about this, we don't care about college. And the whole time in my mind, I'm like, then why are you here? Like, why did you show up? And it resonated at that point what my supervisor said, that young people vote with their feet. And the fact that they're there means that they want to learn. So it's my job instead to fight with them, to teach them how to be college students, right? And so you also, I know that some of the success that students have had in those ACD courses and in the English courses came because some of that in-time teaching that you were able to do to students. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That sort of teaching that you have to do with students to get them to learn some of those soft skills, those college skills.
Yeah, so now me as a college graduate had gone through it, and now for me it's simple to think like, oh, I'm just gonna email the professor or I'm gonna go to their office hours and have a conversation with them. But the high school students don't know how that works. They're used to their high school, the way that their model, the high school model, so they don't know that they have to go and reach out. It's very different in a college class versus a high school class. The students, as many of you know, professors, you know, we have an hour and 20 minutes in your class. Maybe we'll make the connection, maybe we don't make the connection. Professors will just attend class. And a lot of the students are still in that idea that they don't know how to build the relationship with the professors. So one of the major things that we help students out is being advocates for themselves, for their education, like communicating with the professor and letting them know I'm not going to be in class, or emailing them, I missed class, how can I make it up, or just even knowing what questions to ask. So one of the things that I find myself doing a lot is coaching students on questions to ask, and that's a lot with financial aid too. So towards the end of school, when they're transitioning over to become freshmen in college, a lot of them struggle with financial aid and they don't know how to answer those questions. Myself included, when I first was a student, I didn't know when they asked me to bring a tax transcript. I don't know what that means. How do I get it? But a lot of students just see that and then they'll just give up. Like, they don't bother asking questions. Like, they're just shy, and it's my job kind of to pull it out of them. Like, so what do you need? How can I help you? Come, let's meet. This is the office you have to go to. Or even just like when they're enrolling in classes and it's waitlisted. So how do I reach out to this professor and ask them if I could still join their class? Looking up their emails. So just coaching them to send an email. That's something simple that I, as a college graduate, now I have the skills, but I'm pretty sure if I started first as a new student, that would have been something like, oh, it's waitlisted, I'm just gonna look for a different one. But so those soft skills are the ones that I know help the students in the long run.
Yeah, and they have a huge impact, right? I know from the class that we did, the English writing class that we did in the summer, it was so valuable to have somebody that's alongside the class, right? Some classified members that can mentor the students, that can teach them some of the skills that I don't really necessarily, I assume that they come in with, right? Like, so I assume that the students, if they have a question, that they know how to reach me, right? But that, as you highlighted, some of the students just don't have that skill established, right? So those kind of like real-time teaching of skills is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Yeah. For folks in the Writing Center, another reality is that I want to sort of jump into is that the process is not, the process to get to these results, right, these system types of results, is not that easy. It requires maybe I know because I participated in it, but like it requires a lot of various types of efforts. Can y'all talk about the different steps that you took to get to those 3 changes that you implemented?
Sure. One of the steps was going to equity workshops and figuring out how to adapt what we saw and heard about in the workshops to the Writing Center. And I think that was just a lot of conversations among us, but we also reached out to students. We did a survey with students. We did focus groups to hear from our own students what they'd most like to see changed at the Writing Center. So it was kind of those 2 things together, kind of adapting what we heard from experts, but also asking our own students through the focus groups and getting the students who work at the Writing Center involved in the process too, so that they would give us feedback about what they would like to see as students. Do you all want to add more to that?
Yeah, I guess each presentation that we went to turned into like a research focus, which was usually like we're getting information from students somehow. And I think one of the most valuable was the focus groups that we did. We did them specifically with African American students. And that took a lot of work. It took like a lot more work than I thought it would, because we wanted to have it facilitated by Black instructors or staff. We wanted it to be someplace completely outside of the library. We wanted real feedback from students. And then our questions, developing questions. We had our own tutors look at those questions, and we had to throw a whole bunch of stuff out and then start, so all of that process, I think, it was challenging, but it was also really fun, and it allowed us to collaborate with a lot of different people, and just sort of tap into the information that we needed from the students themselves. And so, yeah.
So could you talk a little bit more about what was the value of the student voice, right? Like whether it was in setting up the questions or whether it's in the input of the students that you work with, what kind of perspectives were they able to showcase that maybe you weren't thinking about?
I think like the further I get away from being a student, I was a student here too, it amazes me that I'm like, oh wow, I'm really off the mark, like just things that, from their perspective, they're like, no, this is too much. Like, you should just organize it 1, 2, 3 like this. And I think that the way that we're looking at it is from a research perspective or a program perspective, what other writing centers do throughout the state, throughout the country, whatever. But the way they're looking at it is like, why am I here? And what do you have some pizza for me to eat? Like while I'm here, So all these things that that we weren't paying attention to, I think we learned little lessons from to make each next thing that we do easier, I guess, if that answers the question.
Just being exposed to different perspectives, right, that you weren't thinking about, right, or vantage points that you didn't have access to viewing, right? And so to that point, Donna, can you talk a little bit about what sort of vantage points do you have access to when you're working with those sort of professional learning communities?
Well, I think it's incredibly powerful to be in community with other educators, other faculty, and to learn from each other, and to hear what we do. I think about when I started teaching here in 2006, Carla mentioned when she was a student, she would come, she would go to her class, and then she would leave. And in many ways, I was that faculty member, partly because I was part-time and I had to leave and go to the other school I taught at. But I remember very well that during that time, the only time anyone would be in my classroom other than me would be when I was being, for performance review, right? And so no one was really seeing me teach and therefore giving me any, feedback on how I taught, and except for otherwise, than in the performance review, which we all know is not a true indication of anyone's teaching. It's the one class that you teach, the best class of your whole semester that you plan, 20, hours to do. But once, like all of the learning communities that I mentioned earlier have a really strong observation component. So we're in each other's classrooms all the time. Not only that, is we share materials. So as one of the city ways, the one about making relatable materials and making them accessible, it's so powerful to share what we do in our classes with each other. I mean, it seems so simple, but there's not a lot of ways, there's not a lot of forums for us to do that and to really talk about teaching. And so I feel like another sort of, you asked about the perspectives, being able to talk with other educators about, for example, the flexibility piece. We feel really scared when it comes to flexibility. Are we giving up? Are we letting go of standards? If I don't hold the line, will my students take advantage of me, and that sort of thing. It's so helpful to be able to talk in real ways with other educators, kind of put the ego to the door, out the door, and just really talk about how we feel about those things in community. Devon talked about how important, how powerful creating community amongst his students, how important, how powerful that was. But how do we, and I know we all, including myself, talk about we want to create community in our classrooms. We want our students to feel like they are part of a community. But how can we do that if we aren't in community with each other, right? We can't. So, so the professional learning communities that I'm involved in have been ways that I've been able to, that has been able to happen.
Thank you. So and this would just sort of be for the whole panel, what have been the benefits, just that you yourself experienced, what are the benefits that you've experienced, not the benefits to the students, but just the benefits to you as a professional and some of the changes that you've implemented?
I might just jump in and say, whenever I look at long records of research about, student achievement, I can get really bogged down in it and sort of, it feels really heavy. And I think that actually the more that we interact with the students who work with us and with the students who come in and with all these other smart minds on campus, that lifts away a little bit. And like I said, it does kind of make the work that we're doing more fun. And so, but it's tiring also because it just keeps going and going and going. But being in community with different people, I've taken so many little bits and snippets from conversations, probably with a lot of people here, that I hang on to and then connect with them, all of us do, and pull ideas in, and then it doesn't feel like we're doing it all by ourselves, I guess. I think that that's positive.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what Megan was saying just then and just say that being on this campus and working with Susan and Megan, people who do value collaboration with other people, has made me a better tutor for students that I talk to every day, and it's made me a lot more brave. I remember when I was in my interview for this position, Susan brought up the Writing Center's equity efforts and said, what do you think? What have you done in the past to help disproportionately impacted students? And I had never been in a position where anyone had brought up that they were thinking about that or invited me to think about it. And being in community with other people and being brave enough to listen to other people and just try, I think, has made me better for students. It's made me less anxious to try things and talk to other people. Like, I appreciate this campus. Thank you, everyone.
I want to add to that, or to extend that. It's really, in my experience, I've been able to be in, form relationships with colleagues and people who I wouldn't otherwise have been in their spaces. And I say this as a white faculty member, how important it is for me to be able to be in relationships with other people. For example, my faculty, my colleagues of color, that's incredibly important for me to be able to have relationships with those people, because if I can't do that, how can I possibly have relationships with my students who are majority students of color, right? And so the question was about the best thing about it, was it a question?
Benefit?
Yeah. This sounds so, the best thing about it is the relationships that I've formed. I have to say that.
And I like to, and I agree with that too. For me, the overlap between when you're at an institution and an English concept or idea and a chemistry concept or idea, right? They seem so far apart. And to be able to work with other instructors across discipline to develop something that can be applied to a science class, and we're seeing success. I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, just forming those relationships with students that, students go through stuff, so it has made me a more compassionate instructor. And I think that probably not having these incentives embedded within the course for students who want to open up to you, then I probably not know some of the issues that my students are going through.
Thank you. So I'd like to close by first asking of the panel, how many folks on the panel were Los Rios alumni? And so earlier the question was, what does student success look like? Right? And I jokingly told, Adam, I was like, man, right here. But what I meant to say is that is what student success looks like outside of myself, but like this is what student success looks like. Students, that when we engage with our students and empower them to come back to their communities and empower their communities, right? Whether that's through education, whether that's through business, whether that's through health professions, whatever it is, right? That we see our students as part of our community instead of seeing them as aliens, right? Recognize that they're actually a part of our lives, that we're ensuring that tomorrow's faculty are well prepared as people invested in me, right? That we're ensuring that tomorrow's health professions are best prepared in our classroom right now. And the way that we do that is not by arriving at a position of like, I am an expert, listen to me, I have all of the knowledge, right? But instead, at least what's being highlighted today is that meaningful success is synonymous with curiosity, fear and vulnerability, and at the same time, the courage to do something different. Because if we keep doing the same, we're gonna experience the exact same results. And those results are, at least in my mind, criminal, right? And so I invite folks to if you're sitting in this room and you're curious about something, you're in the right place. If you're sitting in this room and you have doubts about your practice, you're in the right place. And that is gonna be actually your fuel for excellence. The curiosity, the vulnerability to do something different, and hopefully you will find a community that pushes you, encourages you to do the work, right? Because that's how I believe if we engage with those sort of incremental changes across the board, we can reach those goals. All right, so with that, I invite folks to do something that makes them incredibly uncomfortable, as I just did, is that, especially the acknowledgement of the land, folks. I want to say again, and I want to honor Carla as well for doing this, everybody from the Writing Center for doing this, Dr. Stewart for doing this, Donna for doing this, because this was not necessarily easy, but if we don't do it, nobody will. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. I want to first thank all of you for being here in attendance. As we close the program today in relationship to enhancing student success, we want to reach out also to thank certainly the panel once again. To the interactive session facilitators and all those who participated, well over 300 people participated in the various breakout sessions. To Tracy Gomez. She challenges us to integrate those 4 ways, and I have to share with her that when she provided it to me, I went back to my office and I created a video because I attended the Canvas studio and created a video and talked about the 4 ways, and am now ready to share that video with the students before they arrive the first day. Lastly, and most importantly, I think, is the transformational leadership of President Gutierrez. Thank you so much. And finally, to all of those who were in the City Cafe, Student Leadership and Development, the Career Center, RISE, Financial Aid, CalWorks, the Food Pantry, CalFresh, City Hub, Puente, Raza, Umoja, Ashe, the cohort learning communities, the philanthropy scholarships, the intervention office brochures, and the engagement center booklets that Molly Springer put together. With all of those student support outreach programs available. As you heard one of the students speak about DSPS, we got this. And I believe that we truly have it in our vision for students. So with that, I want to announce two other things, that the DSPS will have an open house this afternoon from 1:15 to 4. You can stop by anytime. The SOS tables are still in need of volunteers. They'd like to have 2 or 3 people during each of those sessions. So there was a email sent out by Evelyn to have you touch base if you have time, either on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then finally, the division and department meetings traditionally are between 1 and 4 this afternoon. So please take a moment to check in with your division offices to find specific times and locations. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending, and I wish you a very successful enhanced student success semester for the new decade of 2020. Thank you so much.